Um, Roughly how many Razorbacks would you kill in a season?
There isn't a season for Razorbacks, girlie.
Then why kill them?
You want to know? There's something about blasting the shit out of a Razorback that brightens up my whole day.
Razorback is a horror movie about a giant pig, and it's one of the most startlingly beautiful films I've ever seen, on a level with Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Russian Ark or Andrei Rublev. It's not quite in the mood for love, but what is? There were several odd animal horror flicks around the early 80s. Prophecy about a Sasquatch-like thing, Wolfen turned lycanthropy into a Native American curse, and in The Howling 3, The Marsupials, a ballerina transforms into a carnivorous kangaroo mid-pirouette. And no, I did not make that up. Razorback was riding on that wave. It was also riding the rise of Ozploitation. Ozploitation films were an indie reaction against the arty Australian cinema like Walkabout or Picnic at Hanging Rock, which were getting international acclaim. In response to these ponderous, stylish, European-feeling films, which were quite good, scrappy B-movie directors pumped out exploitation films that they really felt better expressed the Australian spirit. There's an excellent documentary on this era called Not Quite Hollywood, and it's well worth seeing. Like Ozploitation's American cousin, these movies included a lot of schlock, but also had some meaningful gems, like the apocalyptic film Mad Max, or the Kafkaesque Dead End Drive-In. And also, like its American cousin, Ozploitation launched the careers of some major stars, and led to a more mainstream celebration of Australian culture, with blockbusters like Man from Snowy River and Crocodile Dundee.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Razorback married the B-movie shock of Ozploitation films to the Cannes Film Festival loving care of movies like Hanging Rock. If it weren't a movie about a giant pig, Razorback might be treated with the same reverence as Walkabout, which is my other favorite Australian film. It's cliché, but fair to say that Razorback would not exist without Jaws, whose plot it basically lifts. A man becomes obsessed with a giant killer animal, and when the entire town won't believe him, he assembles a tiny team to fight back. Razorback ups the stakes for its Captain Ahab-like anti-hero by giving him a backstory. Boar hunter Jake lost his grandson in an attack by a wraith-like giant pig that tore through his home. He lost the use of one leg, Captain Ahab much, and his beloved grandson, and he was blamed for the incident by the courts and his own family as a baby killer. Unlike Quint's horror stories in Jaws about the wreck of the USS Indianapolis, here we witness Jake's trauma as a prologue to the film. An American reporter later is sent to Jake's town to do a documentary on kangaroo hunters, and she's rebuffed by the locals, as you might expect. The local dog food factory, Pet Pack, particularly doesn't appreciate her investigations. Pet Pack is run by the requisite 80s Australian movie Insane Punk Rockers. The reporter goes missing, and her husband comes down to Australia to investigate. It's a horror film, and I'd really love anybody who's curious to experience this completely fresh, but I should mention that a couple of scenes are, well, genuinely horrifying. Some of that comes from the titular Razorback, which roams the countryside and terrifies even the local wild boars.
I dissected a sow last week. Guess what I found? A stress ulcer.
Boar's worried.
Yeah. Lately, something's been worrying them a lot.
The Razorback is a metaphor for the punishing donga, a bleak landscape full of hostile wildlife and deadly weather that makes you wonder why anybody would ever settle there. You know what lives in the desert? Things that refuse to die. There's been some good making-ofs of this on YouTube, linked below, so I won't go into the details on what it took to bring the monster to life, but I will say that, like Jaws, this film wisely keeps the boar hidden most of the time, so when it does show up, it's brief and actually scary. Far scarier are the Pet Pack employees. They're the other things that won't die. Isolated from society, they do exactly what they want, and often what they want is sick and deadly.
Jeez, Dicko, you give me that sometimes. If you're gonna do it, just bloody do it.
A lot of horror films rely on giving you one hero, often the final girl, and stuffing the rest of the cast with machete fodder. This one gives us 4 endearing leads whose fates we actually care about. Beth, the earnest reporter, is admittedly the weakest of this group, but her husband Carl is imbued with genuine angst as he looks for her. Jake, the boar hunter, is fun to watch at all times. And the zoologist Sarah, played by Mad Max's Archie Whiteley, provides backup for both Carl and Jake. Sarah is incredibly sexy, but the movie has the good taste to realize that a man searching for his missing wife isn't going to have smooth jazz sexy time with the first zoologist that he meets. I have to applaud Gregory Harrison, Archie Whiteley, and especially Bill Kerr for turning in star-quality performances on a B-movie budget. But even more, you have to admire director Russell Mulcahy and director of photography Dean Simler. Russell Mulcahy directed this and the original Highlander, and he influenced my childhood by making the videos for Turning Japanese and Video Killed the Radio Star, as well as kitschy videos like Hungry Like the Wolf and the impossibly silly Total Eclipse of the Heart. Elton John, Culture Club, The Rolling Stones, Mulcahy's hand was everywhere on MTV back then. Mix that with Dean Simler, who was DP on The Road Warrior, Beyond Thunderdome, Dances with Wolves, and Apocalypto. You can see where this is going. Every shot is astounding. So in respect of these two gentlemen, I will leave you with a poem of visuals that didn't deserve to be in a B-movie about a giant pig. But here we are.